for you, right? So I have slides and I have talking points. They're all irrelevant if they're not topics that you're interested in. So this is for you. And if I'm veering off on a sidebar that is not interesting or not valuable, pull me back, ask questions that are helpful for you. That is the only reason that I'm here today. So, and Dr. Mawhinney is not joining us. He is stuck in New Orleans in a snowstorm. So, thinking good thoughts for Dave as he tries to figure out how to get out of ice and snow covered New Orleans. So quick about me. I've been at CMU now, my goodness, 8 years, which is crazy how fast it's gone. I'm on the faculty. I teach entrepreneurship to MBA students, primarily in the online hybrid program. I'm also an entrepreneur in residence here at Swartz, where I work with students, faculty, alumni, staff, and members of the community to help them execute on their plans for world domination. Again, the only reason that I'm here is to help you. So if ever I can be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out. My background before CMU, I'm not an academic. I don't have formal training in that regard, but I'm an entrepreneur. I've spent almost 30 years in industry, worked as a venture capitalist, worked in technology transfer in universities, and have been a founder in multiple companies, pretty much exclusively robotics, medical technology, surgical simulation, planning, software, and have sort of experienced the gambit of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Had some successes with some companies, had some colossal and epic failures with others, and learned a bunch all on the way. And I think that's the primary benefit I bring to all of you, is not that I have any special secrets or talents, but I have lots of experience and I have lots of connections, and I have a sense for things that can work and a sense for things that might not. And I'm always here to try and help and make sure that you're making decisions that are in the best interest of you and of your business. So that being said, as you would expect, having spent most of my life in tech and in robotics and medical technologies, I spent a ton of time with lawyers. And I spent a ton of money with lawyers, to the extent that I've worked with general counsel type folks. I've worked with intellectual property and immigration, international trade, labor and employment. You name the kind of specialty in the legal field, I have probably spent gobs of money on lawyers trying to figure all that stuff out. In addition, I've been sued 5 times, which is not something that I'm necessarily proud of, but it does bring a lot of experience to the table for all of you. I'm not saying I can help you avoid being sued, but hopefully some of my heartache will again give you some lessons and some things to think about. So that's the perspective I bring, right? I've spent a lot of time building companies that require a lot of complicated legal counsel advice. I've been very fortunate throughout my career to work with some exceptional partners that have been incredibly helpful as I've navigated some of these issues, because it can be challenging. It can be a minefield. And the reason that Dave and I put this talk together is because we've noticed a trend that there's more and more complication. There's more and more demand for our entrepreneurs and our ecosystem to talk to lawyers. And so we thought it made sense to just give some guidance around how to approach, how to select, how to manage costs, all the things that are important. So that's the context of the talk. Any questions or comments, or if you all want to get up and leave, I understand that too. I won't be offended. But anything online, Allison, we're good? Okay, so that being the context, let's jump in. Okay, first question, I get this a lot. When do you need a lawyer? Well, the answer is, if you're thinking about something, forming a company, commercializing technology, thinking about something that might be novel, that's protectable, trying to understand how you're going to sell, whether it's domestic or international, it probably makes sense to talk to a lawyer yesterday. We can't do it yesterday. If your business idea you're working on isn't a time machine, we'll forget about yesterday. We'll focus on today. So why? Right? There's so many different considerations to think about when you're going to form a business. What kind of company do you form? What's your entity? There's so many different options and models, from C corps to S corps to LLCs, Pennsylvania, Delaware. If you've got international students in a component around thinking about a presence outside of the US, there's just so many different factors to consider, pros and cons, right? When you think about co-founders, right? How do you hold each other accountable? How do you understand what's appropriate from an equity split perspective, right? How do you manage things when they go well? How do you manage things when they don't go well? And finally, the right kind of counsel, which we'll dive into in a little more in some future slides, will be more than just someone that is an order taker. Right? You want someone that understands your industry, that has experience, that has connections that can help you. And the example I can give you is my last company was a handheld robot for bone cutting for knee surgery for orthopedics. I spent a lot of time with orthopedic surgeons, a lot of time in labs working on these things. And over time, people would come to me and ask my opinion or ask for referrals when they had a medical issue and they needed a surgeon, they needed an orthopedic surgeon. Who do you recommend? Who should I talk to? And I very rarely recommended a discrete person, but I would say to folks, if you are having a shoulder problem, go find the surgeon that looks at 100 shoulders a month. Don't look for a surgeon that looks at 2 shoulders a month and a couple of knees. If you're having a shoulder problem, go find the specialist, the expert in shoulder pain. Same is true here. If you're a startup, if you're in medical technology, if you're software driven, if you're autonomous vehicles, if you're it's something that's maybe a B Corp, like a societal benefit kind of thing, right? Go find lawyers and counsel and people that you can talk to that have experience in your space. Okay. Now, what's nice for you being here, being part of Carnegie Mellon, being part of the Swartz Center, is you can have these early conversations with a variety of folks at no cost. We have a bench of lawyers and law firms that are on our mentor page, that are active here as sponsors, as partners, as folks that give Connects talks, that are engaged fully with what you're doing. And they are all eager and interested to meet you and are happy to have some conversations early on with no strings attached, with no cost, just to help you understand some of these issues and to help you kind of think about how can you be efficient about addressing them. And that's a benefit you have. And that's intentional on our part. And it's not really limited to legal, by the way. We have experts and folks that are willing to help across all sorts of disciplines. But when we talk about legal, having access to unbiased expertise, advice in a non-threatening environment where you're not obligated provides you with a leg up. Okay? So when do you need a lawyer? Well, if you're thinking about it, you're here at Swartz, if you have your own aspirations for starting a business or getting involved in a startup, if you have technology that you want to commercialize, if you're trying to understand the steps you can take to adequately and appropriately protect yourself, set yourselves up for success, our advice is to talk to someone sooner than later. So there's so many different areas where a lawyer can be helpful. And it's always better to have these conversations early. Now, it's very difficult, honestly, to do irreparable damage. If you go out to LegalZoom or you go to the place and you form a business and you start doing things, and it turns out to be not the appropriate structure, or you make some mistakes and you get an experienced person to come in and help you, he or she will make sure that the corrections are made. So you can course correct. It's very rare to do irreparable damage, but your lives will be simpler, more straightforward, less expensive if you get these folks in early. And since a lot of the work that we do here is technology driven, is more professional, there's not a lot of sort of retail kind of more simple kind of ideas and concepts coming out of Swartz. There's a lot of different areas and specialties that are appropriate. So let's just talk about a couple that we put here. So general counsel is just your general corporate lawyering, right? Someone that can help you incorporate, get your corporate minute book and your board materials together, help you with employment agreements, non-disclosure agreements, potential strategic partnership agreements, stock option plans, all the sort of things that you need to have a solid foundation to launch your business. That's when people talk about, I need someone that's more general counsel focused. Those are the kind of services that a general counsel specialist will provide. Intellectual property, I assume most of us know what that is, right? Patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, proprietary relationships, code, internal assets that you want to protect. And there's a whole methodology and a whole nother world around how to handle those things appropriately. And it can get very complicated and very, very expensive. Talking about US protection, or talking about international protection, a lot of nuance to it, but can be a very valuable asset as you grow your business to protect what you're doing, the novelty of it, the proprietary nature of some of the products and services that you're working towards. So understanding what intellectual property is and how it fits into your strategy as an asset for your business, very important. Immigration, something that we cover quite frequently here. We have one of the best things about Carnegie Mellon is the diversity of our population. And Dave always says there's 4,000 or 5,000 of the smartest people in the world come to Carnegie Mellon every year, and they come from all over. So if you're going to work with folks, if you are someone that has some unique issues or challenges around status and work and timing, getting an immigration expert, incredibly important, will be really helpful for you. Transactions, M&A, right? Thinking about fundraising, thinking about if you're going to sell, if you're going to buy. So M&A type lawyers, corporate lawyers, similar general counsel, a lot of them can do both. And then the international piece. Think about trade, think about tariffs, think about the regulations that you need to subscribe to if you're selling internationally. So again, just some examples. But as you're building out your company's plan for launch and scale and value maximization and whatever your return, sale or grow and harvest or merger or whatever you're thinking is going to happen in your business, these, among others, are going to be really important factors to consider. And you want to make sure that you have appropriate experts to help you. So where are we, right? So we're at this situation where you need to have someone in your corner who understands your business, who understands your stage, who understands what you're trying to do, and has experience to help you make sure that you have everything you need so you can execute on your business. No one forms a company with the objective of working with lawyers, right? But you have to do it right, do it early, set it up appropriately. You'll be in good shape to actually execute on whatever it is that you want to do. Okay? So let me stop there, right? So any questions about the thought process around the importance of bringing counsel to the table early, the access that you'll have here at Carnegie Mellon and the Swartz Center to talk to experts, to sort of think about the type of advice, the type of folks you want to work with, any questions around any of the particular types of legal services we're talking about before we get into nuances around cost and selection of those sort of things? Yes?
Actually, you may explain that. Thank you for explaining like transactions and international. General counsel, I hear this term all the time. What is general counsel actually like? What do I go to them for? Are they sort of like my? Actually, I'll just let you.
Yeah, no.
I have a metaphor in my mind.
I know you're thinking. Are they sort of like your air traffic control for?
Yeah, in a way.
Right. Yeah. So typically, yes, when you start, someone that performs the sort of general counsel or corporate type legal services will help you incorporate, right? Get all the paperwork done, get you filed in the appropriate state. They'll make sure that all your agreements are in place. Right? You need everything from invention assignments and employment agreements and stock option plans and different kinds of elections that you have to submit to the SEC when you're granted stock. So, what's nice about those types of things, particularly around here, is a lot of that stuff is just rinse and repeat, right? That's why it's important to find someone that does these things all the time. Right? Like, so a lot of the lawyers that we work with, a lot of the lawyers that our companies work with, they have a package. Right? It's like, oh, you're a faculty member. You've got an idea whether it's licensable or not licensable. We understand, right? So here's the kind of corporation. Here's the steps that you need to take so you can hit the ground running. Here's the package. We'll help you figure it out. And then typically those are your point person. If you're going to use this, you don't have to use the same firm for all these services, but they can help you, sort of with connections and sort of understand nuances around all the different needs that you have. Okay, does that help? Yes. And again, I emphasize it again. You're in a unique situation. We know folks, we have folks across all these areas, among others, that are eager to meet you because they think that you're the next, Duolingo, right? Or the next, you name it, right? And so they're willing to put time in and try to help you early because they want to establish those relationships, trust, prove their value, so you continue to use them as you grow and achieve success. Any other questions? All right, move on. So, a lot of lawyers out there, lots of them. We touched on this a little bit, and I should probably change these bullets, right? So how do you find a lawyer, right? There's a lot of them advertised on TV, right? There's personal injury folks, maybe a billboard, maybe a radio ad. Probably not the kind of lawyer that we're looking for, but it can be challenging. And so in our recommendation is to find folks that are referred to you by people whose opinions you trust. So they're credible and they're validated. Understand their experience and relevance to your industry. One of the first things I did early in my medical robotics days was we sat down with a firm that was going to help us with some IP work. They're helping us with a patent. And I asked them to provide me with examples of clients and folks they've worked with prosecuting similar patent applications, right? Do they have experience in robotics? Do they have experience in orthopedics or neurosurgery? Do they have experience national, international, right? And if I would have got blank stares, I would have moved on to a different firm, a different lawyer. So usually our recommendation is the starting point is to talk to people who you know and trust and are experienced, that will give you unbiased advice and a number of options. You should almost always talk to multiple candidates. Ask those questions, right? What experience do they have in your industry? How do they approach working with startup companies? We're going to get into cost here in a little bit, but trying to understand you're under no obligation, right? They're selling you on their ability to help you, right? Just as I said, the only reason I'm here is to work with all of you is to help you be successful. And that should be exactly the same case with your lawyer. He or she should be exclusively focused on giving you the advice and tools and expertise that you need to put you in the best position to be successful. So I and Dave and many of our colleagues here in Swartz, we recommend being thoughtful around the selection process, asking for referrals from people that you trust and whose opinions you respect and have appropriate experience, talking to candidates and understanding whether you have a fit with them from a philosophical and personality approach, whether they do or do not have experience in your industry, whether they do or do not have experience working with companies at a similar stage and state as yours, and go from there. Pretty straightforward. So this is where it gets a little trickier, right? So you want to access the advice and you want to work with this partner of yours who's invested in your success. But every time you pick up the phone, the clock starts, right? And you don't want to be in a situation where you're frivolous with your dollars and you're just spend on legal advice and counsel. But you also don't want to be in a situation where you're afraid to call or to talk or to get that advice because you're worried about the bill. So you want to try to thread that needle. And the best way to do it is to communicate. And this is really the impetus for this talk, because I'll show you some examples. We've had some examples of some of our companies and other companies too, it's not limited to us, where the legal costs have been disproportionate relative to the value in the work. And it's very frustrating when we see things that we know we could help with and that work could get done within an appropriate boundary. And there are standards for that. And seeing some of our companies and some folks in the community and friends of ours being taken advantage of is probably too strong a word, but not understanding enough about how this works to have the ability to control. So we want to have that balance, right? We want to make sure that we're not frivolous and spend, unless you're in a very fortunate position to have a limitless budget. I hope you are. Been here 8 years, been in tech for 30 plus. Maybe met one company that had essentially limitless funds. But not limitless, but so much funding that it would been very hard for them to spend it. But everyone else is resource constrained. Okay. So communicate, be upfront. Again, this is your service provider, this is your partner. Get them to explain to you the nature. When you say, here's what I need, have them explain to you what that will take, what that looks like, what are the boundaries, what are the timing, what are the cost estimates. Let's stay in touch and make sure that we're on track, right? If you come up with a boundary of a project and a budget with your lawyer to say file a patent, but it ends up spinning out and you end up having lots of back and forth, and the lawyer spends a lot more time than he or she thought, the last thing you want is to be surprised by a bill that's a lot more than you anticipated, that you discussed. So that's why the communication piece is the key. So the preparation that you can do, the work that you can complete, the guidance that your counsel can provide, and being very open and transparent about communication is incredibly important, right? So I don't want you, if you need something, if you're rolling with your business and there's a big company that wants to enter into a partnership with you to work on a demonstration project, so you can prove to them that your product or service is impactful, so they would contemplate, working with you at a grander scale, and you put a little pilot agreement in place. I would hate for you as entrepreneurs to just sign it without having an expert talk and review it with you because you're worried about the cost. I would also hate for you to see you spend $25,000 on legal fees for a $30,000 project, right? So there has to be something in the middle. So understanding scope, boundaries, communicate, right? So if it were me, I would call my counsel and say, hey, we're working with this giant company. Here's the scope. Here's the nature of the arrangement. Here's our goals. Here's their goals. Here's what we talked about. I'm going to send you their agreement. Let me know what you think it'll cost and how long you think it'll take to get your comments. Let's be reasonable sort of about what we want to do. Let's understand the issues together, right? What's critical, what's must have, what's nice to have. And let's take a look, and then let's convene and understand what our response should be, right? And what it's going to cost me, and how that relates to putting back a turn of this document that is consistent with the nature of the project and the goals we're trying to accomplish with this potential partner, right? Versus just sending an agreement to your counsel saying, hey, take a look at this, right? So that's really important. And they'll appreciate it, because the good ones, they also get invested in you. They also want to see you succeed. They want to help. And so when you can explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your goals are, how they can help, it's an incredibly powerful tool. It helps you punch above your weight. When you have really strong advice and expertise behind you, you're being thoughtful about your responses and how you construct the infrastructure of your business, how you manage your communications, how you're thinking about getting deals done, raising money, hiring people, right? It sends an incredibly powerful message, and it absolutely makes a difference. Does that make sense? Any questions from anyone to this point? Again, it's a lot of, yeah, go ahead.
In regards to, so one of the things that's interesting about being here is that you're saying we can talk to people. So does Swartz have things like rate sheets for like general services, like estimates and things like that? Or are these all pretty like ad hoc? Like it's like you gotta really just talk to an individual ordering their estimates.
So the question is, how do we have insight and help with the ability to sort of give visibility to rates and costs and those sorts of things, right? So not discreetly.
Okay.
So we don't have a rate sheet, but I think that's a fair question, right? So I have startup packages on here. A lot of law firms, for startup companies, if you say, hey, I'm just starting out, there's 2 co-founders, we're licensing technology out of Carnegie Mellon, we need to get incorporated, we need to roll with this sort of our commercialization strategy. A lot of them say, okay, well, for $5,000, we will do your incorporation, and we'll give you all the documents you need, and we'll help you with the preliminary negotiation of the license, and we'll introduce you to RP departments, so they'll do some things, and so that cost is capitated.
Yeah.
Other places will discount, other places will do some things for free. So it's a good question to ask, right? We're all sensitive to cost. So we don't have specific rate sheets, but some firms that we work with and others that we don't are very transparent and publish, right? What their rates are, what their packages cost. So it's a fair question to ask. It's something that you should ask, right? As far as our rate sheet, Allison and I, our rate to you is 0. So feel free to use us as much as possible, but keep in mind you get what you pay for. No, but that's again, that's why we're here, right? So if you would come to us and say, all right, well, here's where we are. We need to get this launched. There's this number of co-founders, and here's our plan. And we're trying to get an SBIR, and we're trying to do this. Like we can sort of map that out and say, all right, so this is what this looks like. Let's have some conversations with some people that understand what you're trying to do, have experience working with companies and inventors and entrepreneurs, and let's try to understand how they can help you and what that would cost and what that looks like. And investing that time up front makes a huge difference. You don't want things to get away from you. Okay. Costs. So, one of my 5 lawsuits was an IP, patent infringement lawsuit brought against us by one of our largest competitors. And so we had to retain litigation counsel, folks that had experience in the courtroom to defend ourselves. And we ended up using a firm out of New York. And they were very capable, and we actually beat it back and we were able to stay in existence. But 2 of the senior partners worked on this with us. And we were in no position to negotiate anything, right? We just needed their help. We desperately needed their help. And every call we had, it was all hourly. There were no discounts, no packages, no nothing. And every call that we had, no matter what it was, they put their 2 senior partners on the call every time. They had an East Coast person and a West Coast person. So every single time that we had a question or we had to convene to talk about strategy or talk about what's going on with our lawsuit, the clock started at $2,500 an hour. And there was nothing I could do about it. And before you know it, we're 5 million into this thing. We're 8 million. It just compounds. But we needed it, right? So I spent 5-6 million on legal to beat back this lawsuit, and we sold the company for 275 million. So it's a pretty good ROI, right? So thinking about the gross dollars isn't always necessarily the way to do it. Thinking about value, thinking about goals and impact is what matters. But we're all capital constrained, almost all of us, right? We're all trying to think about how do we allocate our precious resources to move this business forward, to put ourselves, again, in the best position to be successful. And you can have these conversations. What's your hourly rate? Do you discount for startups? Right? Can you do a retainer? Fixed monthly fee, so you can budget. What do you get for that retainer? What happens if you're over? What happens if you're under? Right? If you have a specific project, can you negotiate and talk to them about a fixed fee? Again, within reason. And the communication piece is incredibly important. So there's so many different ways that you can engage. And I'm not here to say your job is to try to beat your lawyer up as much as possible when it comes to fees. But you have to be mindful of it. You have to understand your budget. You have to understand your goals, what you're trying to get out of it. You have to be transparent with them. And you think about it from the perspective of an ROI, right? Was I happy to spend $5 or $6 million on legal expenses to defend ourselves against the intellectual property lawsuit? Absolutely not. But when I look back on it now, right, it was nothing. It was a 2% of our transaction, right? Without that, if we would not have prevailed, we never would have been able to get to that transaction. Now, we couldn't predict the future, right? So it was painful when I was in it, but it's about value, impact, ROI, communication, feeling that these folks are partnering with you. Okay. And the right kind of service provider will give you that sense, will be that kind of person. And there's plenty of them out there. We work with a lot of them. I see it every day. Okay. Any questions on costs and payments and those sorts of things? There's some these startup package structures are kind of interesting. A lot of firms will say somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000 up front. And and then you'll get this whole laundry list of stuff to get you off the ground and get you running. And then we'll discount our fees for the first year, or we'll defer our fees until you get financing. So there's creativity with a lot of these folks around how they'll engage with you. But you have to ask, and you have to understand, and you have to have experts and people with experience to help you, right? And there's how many EIRs do we have, Alice? Now, six? There's six. Yeah, so I'm one of six. We all have different experiences, but we all share the fact that we have all been entrepreneurs. We've all built companies. We've all gone through this. And so you can come and talk to any of us or any of our mentors that are in industry or any of some other professors. We have some adjuncts and some other people that are also have experience in industry and get advice. It's a huge advantage for you. Okay, any questions about cost? Again, I am always leery to say, let's go after wholesale pricing with retail services, right? We want to be reasonable, but you don't be taken advantage of, and you make sure there's a value there. And all the folks, whether it's lawyers or accountants or insurance agents or consultants or whomever you're working with, right? They understand. And they'll work with you. The good ones will work with you, and they'll provide you the advice that you need. Okay. All right. So things will change. You're sitting here today, and maybe a couple of co-founders, maybe a small little something, but then maybe someday you're opening offices around the country, around the world. Maybe you've got products in a variety of places. Maybe you've got all sorts of things you need to work with, right? So people that don't, if you set it and forget it, you're conceivably or potentially setting yourself up for problems down the road. So continue to stay on top of things. Essentially, at the end of the day, the whole point of this talk is get good advice. Make sure you're working with folks that have expertise, experience that can provide you with value that you feel that have your best interests at heart. Be upfront and communicate about the scope of services, the cost, expectations, what you hope to get in return, and make sure that you have an ongoing dialogue so you can communicate and continue to talk to these folks. Because again, the good ones aren't in this to try and squeeze as much hourly rate out of you as they can. They're in this to help you so you grow, so you're successful, and as a result, they're successful. But if you don't keep an eye on it, if you don't ask those questions, if you don't manage this, you're setting yourself up. If someone would come to you and say, hey, I'm going to incorporate, and I know I have a friend of a friend who's a lawyer, and they said for $10,000, they'll get our company incorporated and give us some of our documents to help us get on our way, right? And you don't have a perspective or scale. And I would say, well, I would really want to understand more about what that means, because that seems like an awfully high number. I wouldn't say definitively it's too high, right? But that my first thought would be just to kind of get you off the ground and get you going and launch you. It seems like a pretty high number. Let's look at what you're getting. Let's look at what that means. Let's look at the value that that brings. Let's compare that to some other offerings and some other folks to make sure that you're getting what you need to put you in the best position to be successful. That's my recurring theme, because that's the only reason that you're working with any of us, and that it's reasonable and makes sense relative to the market. Don't be afraid to make changes. Don't be afraid to ask hard questions. And so here I stand up here as an expert, providing all this valuable wisdom to you. But I am not without my skeletons in my closet. So the first example is I think it came from Dave. So Series A preferred stock financing. I don't know the details, but it shouldn't cost $125,000 unless there's something really crazy about it. But the second one is mine. So back in the early days of my company, when I was young and impressionable, I hired a law firm to help my company submit a patent application because it was a friend of a friend. And I didn't do all the things that I just explained to you that you should do. And we ended up spending $60,000 on a, I want to say dog shit patent, but I don't want to swear. So it was a bad patent. So it was not a professionally well done, well constructed patent application. And it wasn't granted. And it took forever and cost probably 2.5 times what it should have. But I learned a hard lesson, right? And then I pivoted to finding counsel through trusted referrals and people that understood. And we ended up with 43 patents in our company. So I was 0 for 1, and then we did much better after that. But it was a hard lesson. It was a hard, expensive lesson to learn. And that's why I'm here. So you don't have to go through that. So you don't have to make that mistake and cost you or your company $60,000 to learn a lesson. There's no guarantees, but there's resources and infrastructure and experience and expertise of the Swartz Center can hopefully help you make better decisions to your benefit. And